أيها الإخوة والأخوات، يسعدني ويشرفني نيابة عن المجلس العربي للتكامل الإقليمي أن أرحب بالجميع في هذا اللقاء الخاص والفريد من نوعه واللا سباق لها، ألا وهو لقاء من صحفيين وإعلاميين بارزين في كل من السعودية والبحرين والإمارات العربية المتحدة مع رئيس وزراء التناوب ورئيس دفاع دولة إسرائيل الفريق بني جانتس. כבודו השר, שלום וברכה.
שלום וברכה.
At your request, I'm going to speak primarily in English. I will briefly say that the Arab Council for Regional Integration is honored to be able to host you today. It is strange that for all these decades, Arab journalists have largely had no direct contact with ministers of defense, and it is wonderful that you are granting them this opportunity at a time of great importance for them to share their thoughts, ideas, feelings, and questions with you, and for them to hear from you directly. So what I'd like to do is very briefly introduce the wonderful people who have joined us in this discussion. You have Mohammed Al-Hammadi, who is from the UAE. He is the editor-in-chief of the important daily newspaper Al-Ru'ya and chairman of the board of directors of the UAE Journalists Association. You have Ahdiya Ahmed Al-Sayed, in a sense his counterpart in Bahrain, who is the president of the Bahraini Journalists Association. From Saudi Arabia, Najat Saeed is an accomplished writer and researcher and has a PhD in communications and teaches at a university in the UAE. And Ismail Nar, I'm sorry, I'll say Rashid Al-Hamr from Bahrain, who is an editor at Al-Ayam and a member of that storied institution's board of directors, great daily newspaper. And Ismail Nar from Al Arabiya, Saudi Arabia's flagship pan-Arab news channel. And finally, and in a way, quite importantly, is the director of the Arab Council for Regional Integration, a media man himself, and really a key player in all these efforts, and that is Mustafa Al-Dessouqi. So welcome all. Thank you, Minister Gantz. We know you'd like to share some words with us before we start, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you, everybody, all my friends. I may say so, and I'm gladly saying so. I'm very excited for this opportunity. Never had an opportunity to speak with so many journalists from the region before, and I'm very honored to share this premiere with you. I want to thank the Arab Council for Regional Integration for the opportunity to have this discussion, and with your permission, I will say a few opening remarks, but then most important, I hope to have a candid and true discussion on several topics. And last but not least, let me hope that this is not our last meeting, and I'm looking forward for the opportunity to meet in person or as a group, inshallah, as soon as possible, somewhere in the Middle East, where borders are being lifted and relations are being upgraded. So thank you so very much for this opportunity. I want to share with you that as the former chief of staff, who actually dedicated his life for serving the state of Israel in uniform, and also as a political leader, I know from close how important and crucial peace agreement between neighbors in the region are. It is this very position that I say, the driving spirit of long-lasting peace are the people. This is immensely important opportunity to show the world, but even more important, to show our next generation, our young generation, how warm and true peace in our region can look like. And the fact that the children in Abu Dhabi are already learning about the importance of peace between our countries fills me with lots of joy and lots of hope. I commend His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Zayed and His Majesty King Mohammed for their wise and visionary decision to move forward to peace with Israel. I'm following the remarkable reforms the region is undergoing, driven also by His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, promoting the quest for tolerance among all religions, for stability and better future for the next generation. I must say, we have a major issue of mutual interest. We all share in struggle against extremism and against the Iranian nuclear threat and aggression. This is a threat to the region and to the world, and we will create a united front to face it. Especially during turbulent times like this of global pandemic, peace makes us stronger. Let us be true and candid. We can only face the uncertainties of COVID-19 through international and regional solidarity and collaboration. As soon as the health circumstances allow it, I'm looking forward to seeing each and every one of you visiting the state of Israel. Small country that has a lot to show and a lot to share. And during this period of the Jewish high holidays, and in the spirit of peace unleashed by the historic Abraham Accord, I will conclude these opening remarks by saying from the Jewish prayer of those days, Yevarchecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yair Adonai panav elecha v'yechuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
Thank you, Minister Gantz. And for those of you who don't know Hebrew, that was the Birkat HaKohanim, which is a very important prayer and a blessing that is shared with people one loves in synagogues all over the world. We'd like to begin by turning to Mohammed Al-Hammadi, the editor-in-chief of Al-Ru'ya in the UAE, and such a prominent leadership voice among UAE journalists in his capacity as the leader of its journalist association. تفضل أستاذ محمد.
شكرا جزيلا جوزيف وشكرا لمعالي الوزير بيني غانتس. حقيقة لدي سؤالين مرتبطين بالأمن والاستقرار في المنطقة.
Thank you, Joseph, and thank you, Minister Gantz. I actually have two questions related to security and stability in the region.
السؤال الأول مرتبط بالدول التي تشكل تهديد وخطر على المنطقة بأسرها، المنطقة العربية الشرق الأوسط بشكل عام.
The first question concerns those states that amount to and pose a security threat, a serious threat to all countries of the region as in general.
هناك دولتين، طبعا هناك إيران والجميع يتفق على الخطر الإيراني وأنها عدو للدول العربية، وإسرائيل تعتبرها كذلك خطر عليها.
There are two of these in my assessment. The first is, of course, Iran, which my country and so many others consider to be a threat, and I know well that Israel does too.
الدولة الأخرى التي تهدد المنطقة الآن هي تركيا بقيادة الرئيس طيب أردوغان، لكن تركيا تربطها علاقات جيدة مع إسرائيل وتعتبر حليف.
The other is Turkey, the Turkey that is under the leadership of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. We consider it too a threat. At the same time, we know that the state of Israel has relations with it and considers it an ally.
سؤالي هو كيف تقيمون المخاطر الإقليمية بوجود إيران والخطر الإيراني نريدك أن تحدث عنه وأن تعطينا رأيك في الدور التركي الذي يزعزع الأمن والاستقرار في المنطقة. هذا سؤال.
And so our question is, how indeed do you appraise the security situation in the region between those two states, the Iranian threat on the one hand, and the Turkish role in our assessment in destabilizing the region on the other?
Yes, thank you very much, Muhammad. Indeed, a very serious issue. And if I may expand a bit, I think that there are mutual elements between the Iranians and the Turks. Both represents ancient and respected history, culture, and unfortunately, both represents current regime who actually denying promotion of peace and supporting regional aggression. Definitely, that is the case with Iran. You know, 40-something years back, Israel and the Persian people, as it was along the history, had very good relations. And unfortunately, following the revolution, relations have been deteriorated along the years till the point that we have seen the Iranians pulling their aggressiveness throughout the region, through groups in Iraq, through their activities in the Gulf, through their aggression against Saudi, through the positioning of elements in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Eastern Africa, in Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, we see the Turks' aggression in northern Syria, Kurds, and of course, the eastern side of the Mediterranean, to include some kind of activities and involvement in Libya, all of which pushes away form of stability. And I think we should all stay together, link together, to promote first and foremost peace and stability, which those two countries are not supporting it. Definitely the question of Turkey is a very complicated one, because Turkey is part of NATO. So we must take all the options that we have in our hands and try to influence it through international pressure to make sure that they are pulling their hands from direct terrorism. I know that they are involved in supporting Hamas in Gaza, and they are putting lots of pressure in northern Syria, but I hope that they will come to a point which they will cease their support of destabilizing those areas. I believe that vis-a-vis Iran, we must maintain what is well known under the concept of maximum pressure campaign led by the United States, but not only. And once again, maybe this is a point where I can say I don't know of many generals who support peace like myself. But nevertheless, when someone needs to look into reality, I need to look into reality. I want to share with you that my first operational mission as an IDF soldier was to secure the convoy of late President Sadat from Egypt when he came to speak peace in Jerusalem. And I've been dealing with security ever since, remembering that we must have always two strategic instrumental tools. One, we must seek for peace, support stability, because that's the best security one can bring. But at the very same time, to stay very, very strong, which Israel did for the last 7 or 8 decades almost. And
Thank you.
what I suggest to us all, facing Iran, facing Turkey, is there's 2 elements. First, let's seek stability. Let's seek peace. Let us all remember that there are people on the other side of those arguments. But let us not forget that this is radical regime in Iran that we are facing, and unfortunately not a stabilizing regime in terms of strategy thinking in the head of Turkey. And I think that the best solution for this is to promote this peace that we are now talking about, because that's the best strategic regional answer vis-a-vis those negative trend, I would say, that we see from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Gantz. Your questions, the answers to the question, your answer is very rich, and we know that your time is very limited, and we have many questions. So we hope you'll be generous with us with your time, so that we can hear from everyone. The next speaker is Ahdiya Ahmed Al-Sayed, the president of the Bahrain Journalists Association. Tfaddali, Ahdiya.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for ending your first statement with a prayer, and we pray that we will soon be capable of building amazing bridges between the people of both countries. I had a question, Your Excellency, about Iran, but my colleague Mohammed Al-Hamadi asked that question. The language you're speaking, Your Excellency, is a language of peace, yet Iranians do not speak a language of peace. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard threatened Bahrain a day after we signed the agreement with Israel. Bahrain is now a friendly state, and the relations between us is unique and distinguished. What kind of military cooperation do you expect in the near future between the friendly states that have signed this agreement? And do you think that this military cooperation will be capable of combating any threats coming from Iran and Hezbollah to our region?
Well, this is a very fair and complicated question, I must say. Dealing with security issues for 40 years now, and dealing specifically with the Iranians in so many aspects that I cannot reveal right now, brings me to the point, which is, I think we have the strategic instrument to face Iran. I think that we are stronger than them. And I think that now we may even open more options than we have had before. But with all respect, I think that those kind of things are better off being more, let's say, solid, more covert, and being discussed, not in an open channel as we are now sharing, but definitely I'm sure that the fact that our 2 countries are moving into normalization and peace and collaboration give us strategic instrument of various areas that we haven't had before. I have the notion of thinking that the Iranians understand that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gantz. Our next question comes from Najat Saeed. You've heard her name already. She's the daughter of Saudi Arabia. She is a prolific author in Saudi and Emirati publications, a gifted scholar, and a specialist in the realm of communications and the role of communications in developing nations. So we invite Najat to share her thought and her question.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your excellency. I have two questions. My first question, we are now facing war of ideologies. So no matter what we do, we will not win this fight or this war without fighting the extremist ideologies. So what do you think, in your perspective, what we can do, and what is the strategy to fight this war of ideologies, especially from ideologized regimes like the one in Iran and even Erdogan Turkey? This is number one. My second question is, now we are divided between statehood and non-statehood. So how we can fight the idea of militias? Is there like international community decision to forbidden any kind of militias, and also to forbid any kind of arming those militias? Because as long as those militias are there and they are armed, we will never win this war, and we will never win peace. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, those are two serious issues. First of all, let me suggest I will talk about the militias first, with your permission. From an Israeli experience, I'm aware, or let's say we'll take Hezbollah in Lebanon or whatever he tries to do in other places, just as an example to explain the concept around it. And I believe that we must face the direct threat of the militia itself, but at the very same time, there is what I call statehood responsibility. Let's take the example of Lebanon. Lebanon cannot allow Hezbollah to operate against Israel from Lebanon and tell us a minute later, sorry, this is not us, it's a militia A or B or C, etc., etc. So I think that at the very end of it, each country that faces such threat must be able to perform in both directions against the direct threat posed by the militia itself, but also about the hosting, or I would say enabling government that allows it. If we want to respect government to government decision, government must take statehood responsibility of what's happening from those areas. Now, this is not a short hike in the park. This is very complicated. It takes time, but I believe it's possible. The second issue, which you started with, is how you actually fight extremism. And I think this is a very well made point. This is very complicated. And I think that it's sometimes easier to fight or to face a concrete threat, but it's harder to fight or to struggle an idea. And you are very right. But what I believe is that while facing the operational aspect of what might be the operational instrument of the extremist, we must show the positive outcome of moderate, of cooperation, of peace. Because at the end of the day, one can ask itself, do I prefer to follow hatred, extremism, hate, or do I prefer to follow hope and everything that comes underneath? There's no shortcut. It's going to be a very long journey. There's going to be ups of hopes and down of challenges. But if leadership in both sides, whether it's a political leadership, whether it's educational leadership, whether it's the cultural leadership, authors, writers, people who talk to the people, can strengthen the positive trend, I believe that the good is there to win.
Thank you. We're turning now back to Bahrain, to our friend and colleague, Rashid Nabil Al-Hamar. When we were talking these questions through earlier today, Minister, he also had something in his mind about militias, I think from a different and a novel angle. So please, Rashid, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Your Excellency. In the beginning, I'd like to congratulate you and congratulate our leadership for this historic peace agreement. As you might know, we have common enemies, the enemies of likes of Hezbollah and Hamas. And these militias, they're known for playing the world public opinion against our countries, especially in the human rights realm. They're very famous for using schools, universities, and other public locations, women and children, using them as human shields, locations to launch their attack against peace-protecting government apparatus. Can you share with us how has the State of Israel combated these misinformation campaigns, and how has the State of Israel overcome its international world stage reputation, especially when dealing with human rights organizations, which always tend to take the sensational side of the story?
Thank you very much. This is indeed very sensitive situation that we are facing. Looking back into decades back, militaries were trying to operate not from urban areas, not from civilian areas, and they would do their best to differ between what would consider the military force and what would have ended up being a civilian area. Of course, this is something that terrorist organizations pulled themselves away and took the unfortunate, I would say, advantage of very difficult urban areas and used their civilians as human shield. This is very much the case that we see in Gaza, unfortunately, and this is very much the case that we see in Lebanon, where you can find houses that would have a living room and a missile room in the very same house. And of course, that after you'd end up running after the missile room, you may end up hurting, of course, the living room. And what I've just said, those are true examples. This is not just slogans that I'm using here. This is well-structured intelligence that we have, and we have conveyed some of it, of course, last week and in different times before. I think we must take two measures, I would say. First, we must expose as much as we can. And of course, there are limits to what you can expose because of intelligence, and you always have to be very careful with your intelligence resources. So there's always limitation for this, but you should try and expose as much as one can of showing the examples, just as Israel did last week in the Prime Minister's speech that he gave to the United Nations, and the follow-up that we did in showing examples of what he's talking about to give high level of credibility to this aspect. The second aspect would be more of the operational side, because morality makes our life more complicated. And commanding military force for years and years and experiencing it firsthand, I'm telling you that we always stay on the high ground of morality. Let me share with you for 1 minute story of my mother, my late mother. She passed away a decade ago. It's okay, part of life.
God rest his soul in peace.
We all ended up sometime. She was a Holocaust survivor. And I remember that we had one campaign in Gaza in which we had to face Hamas shooting into Israeli areas. And she was telling me, never stop fighting, but never stop sending them food. Which is basically a dual strategy of keep fighting, but stay on the high ground in terms of morality. As long, and this is my message to you, as long as we are totally certain with ourselves that we are doing whatever possible to prevent harming civilians and to minimize as much as we can the collateral damage of our activities, this is what we should do. Unfortunately, and not because we are blamed for it, because those organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like others are taking some kind of advantage from our high morality, it makes our life more complicated, and sometimes, unfortunately, we see very tragic results. As long as we are absolutely sure that we have done our best to stay out of it as much as possible, I think we should continue and operate. I hope that days will come that reality will enable us not to face this moral dilemma of defending ourselves from one hand, but trying not to hurt those who are not involved as much as we can on the other hand. This is an equation that will never have a solution.
Thank you, General Gantz. We now turn to a rising star in Saudi Arabia's flagship pan-Arab news channel, Al Arabiya, and that is Ismail Nar. Ismail, I believe you have a question as well. Please, tafadhal.
Yep. Thank you, Your Excellency, for agreeing to do this historic meeting. You know, one of a first of its kind with Arab journalists, and we're looking forward to more in the future, inshallah. My question is, where do you see the evolution of the people-to-people relationship between the state of Israel and the Gulf Arab states? You know, we can talk about all the deals we've done diplomatically or politically, but we're seeing examples of this from the UAE side, at least some efforts like the provision of kosher food, for example, in hotels and restaurants will be made mandatory in the near future. And, you know, Bahrain has a native Jewish community that, albeit a very small one, but still it's historically rooted in Bahrain. So what do you think are the next steps, at least from the Israeli side, that can be done to promote more of a people-to-people relationship?
I'm very optimistic about the people-to-people horizon. I think that we have a lot to offer in any area of life. We are well known for our ability in science, in medical, in agriculture, and so many different areas of life other than security. Most people know us for our military strength, which is true because, you know, we never had an alternative, so we must be strong. We cannot afford to lose a fight, to lose a campaign. But there are so many other advantages that have been developed along those years because of this very same necessity, I would say. Israel, till now, was kind of an island nation. We hardly had relations around us. And now that we are not just Egypt and not just Jordan, which is very precious for us, but also other countries are now trying to open for us, we may have even more opportunities to cultivate the relations that we have. So I think we have a lot to offer. The issue, which I hope will help us, is to have some kind of patience. it will take a while. And I think the first and foremost aspect of it will be education. If we will succeed to educate our kids and our youngsters how to accept the other, what is the other culture, how you do business. I have lots of businessmen friends that came back from Abu Dhabi lately, etc. And I'm telling them, hey guys, slow down. I mean, let's do it right, but constantly, and not try to rush up and end up with disappointment because, you know, people were looking for money, or people were looking for technology, or people were looking for their own interest, which is very well understood. But I think if we do it in the right tempo, I would say, eventually we have a lot to offer and a lot to gain. I know that countries around us can offer us capabilities in terms of science, in terms of culture, in terms of manufacture, in terms of commerce. So if we will take one bite at a time, I think we'll end up having the whole meal.
Thank you for that answer. I'd like to give a moment to Mustafa Dessouqi, a seasoned media man himself and the director of the Arab Council for Regional Integration. As we approach the downswing of the discussion, I think he would like to say just a few words. تفضل Mustafa.
شالوم.
Hello.
أنا بتكلم باسم المجلس العربي للتكامل الإقليمي، وعلشان ضيق الوقت تركت كل الأسئلة أرسلتها لزميلي جوزيف. شكرا جزيلا ونرحب بكم جدا.
I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the Arab Council for Regional Integration. In deference to the limit of time, I've asked Joseph to relay a question on my behalf while I take care of some other things, but I wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Shukran.
And so I will choose among his excellent questions two. The first is, how did Israel succeed in dealing with terrorist groups by its borders? For example, Egyptian terrorists in the Sinai that were not necessarily entirely on both sides of the borders, but nonetheless posed a kind of a threat. So that is the first question. The second is it possible for Israel's security sector to broker joint studies and workshops, perhaps between some of Israel's great think tanks and their equivalents in Arab countries, so that security experts who research this matter can do joint research and reach new understandings about shared threats and concerns?
First, I hope that we'll be able to create joint working groups in order to study together different aspects that we see in our region. The more perspectives that you are looking at something, the wider you are. And we obviously look at things from an Israeli perspective, but that's not the only perspective that there is. And I'm sure that if we create the right collaboration and think groups, and you know, you have all level of cooperation, you would have strategic cooperation, you would have economical cooperation, you can have security cooperation. In the security cooperation, you can have different elements of cooperation, starting from intelligence, ending up in doctrine or way of thinking, and force buildup, etc., etc. We are well known for our security industry, and some of which is already known to other countries in the region as well. Facing terrorism, if I have to come up with one recommendation only, I would seek intelligence to find a needle in the haystack, whether it's a huge area, whether it's a very populated area, whether it's undersurface aspect. It's all called for high level of intelligence. And I think that's the way that will enable us to continue this confrontation. So as far as Israel, for example, along our borders, we have a very strong defense, but we also have high level of intelligence of what's happening around us that enable us, in most cases, not that we did always well, but in most cases, to put the right force in the right time, in countering the right target. And I hope that we will be able to do so in the future as well.
I am going to ask one last question, and then, if you would permit us a few more minutes, I would invite one or two of our sort of leading lights here to react or share a response to the ideas and responses that you've given us. The question is from Mariam Al-Ahmadi, who was unfortunately not able to make it today. She's another founding member of the Arab Council for Regional Integration. And what she wanted to say was that part of warming the cold peace is the work of very brave individuals in many Arab countries, both countries that are at peace with Israel and countries that are not yet at peace with Israel, to move the ball forward, to call for peace, to be among the first to meet with Israelis in an effort to set an example for others to follow. And yet, such people face retribution, sometimes from their governments, sometimes from ideological extremist elements in their countries. And so they are in danger as they try to warm the peace on a civil level. Do you have any thoughts? How do you feel about those people? And do you have any thoughts about how to help them?
Well, first, I think that they are very brave. And it's always easier to come up with something which is well established, well agreed, and well understood. But it is by far more complicated to come up with a vision which is not well understood yet, but still to move forward and suggest it. So first, I would like to convey my appreciation for their guts, I would say, for their braveness and willing to do so. Secondly, I would suggest to slowly but surely to try and create connections with others in a more solid way, I would say, not immediately from the jump board, but to find the instrument, to try. And last but not least, it's the combination of supporting education and supporting the right legislation, whether it's in their home countries or whether it's in the international community, that will eventually create a more understanding local atmosphere for their activities. But I must go back to the first aspect. Stay brave.
So now everyone has had a chance to ask a question. And if you'll, as I say, be generous and give us a few more minutes, I would like to invite Mohammed Al-Hammadi, Ahdiya, and Najat to share their thoughts, feelings, reactions to this very unique and unprecedented conversation. Maybe we'll start with Mohammed.
نعم، شكرا جزيلا. الحقيقة أنا أعتقد هذه الجلسة مهمة وفيها معلومات مهمة، فأشكر الوزير أولا على هذا التجاوب وعلى هذه الردود، وربما نحن بحاجة كنا لوقت أطول، هناك أسئلة ربما كثيرة.
So first of all, I'd like to say I found this to be a very important and a discussion, a rich one, in which you shared a lot of information that is valuable. And only would have wished that it could be a longer one, because surely we have many more questions to ask you.
اليوم نحن في وضع ومرحلة تاريخية مهمة. نحن اليوم نعمل من أجل السلام في المنطقة، وكما نؤمن أن السلام ليست مهمة وليست واجب، وإنما هي رسالة يجب أن يعمل من أجلها الجميع.
So today we are all working to advance peace in the region. And we all know very well that peace isn't just a mission, peace isn't just a responsibility, peace is a message that needs to spread far and wide.
ويجب في نفس الوقت أن ندرك أن هناك أعداء للسلام، هناك من لا يريد السلام. فالمهمة تحتاج إلى تضافر الجهود، وأنا أعتقد اليوم أصوات الذين يدعون إلى السلام أصبحت ترتفع بشكل أكبر في منطقتنا، وهذا ما نحتاجه.
And we must never forget that as we move forward toward peace, there are many forces that are dead set against this, that are attacking us and that are trying to defeat peace. And we need to stand with one another and work together to make sure that peace wins the day. And I consider that to be another very important point. Thank you, Joseph and Minister Gantz. So تفضلي يا هدية، تحبين يعني تضيفي شيء، شعور، مداخلة؟
Yes, shukran. General Gantz, first of all, thank you very much for your time. We know you're so busy, but giving us this attention and showing us concern, it really shows your appreciation towards journalists. And from myself and hundreds of journalists in Bahrain, I would like to thank you for sharing these beautiful moments with us. And I promise you, while you are all busy dealing on the leadership level, we as journalists are paving way for human-to-human great relations. And today I can say that Bahrainis have been very warmly welcoming this agreement. And I know that in 12 years' time, when we sit together, we're going to tell you a lot of great stories that have happened in Bahrain. A million thanks.
Thank you, Ahdiya. And we'll conclude. Alas, I wish there were lots more time for everybody, but I'm going to cap it with Najat. I'm sorry, would you like to say something, Minister?
No, I would like to ask from you to give me a minute at the end to say.
Oh, absolutely. We'll give you the last word. But our final comment and reaction will be from Najat Saeed. تفضلي نجاة. ايش يخطر على بالك؟
Okay, thank you for everybody. Thank you, Your Excellency. Actually, most of commentators have mentioned what I want to mention, but I would like to highlight one main point. Like because not all the Arab world has done this kind of peace of treaty, but the message that I would like Emirat and Bahrain to promote to the rest of the Arab world, that this is different kind of peace. This is a warm peace, is not a cold peace like the one that happened in Egypt and Jordan. The other thing, you will never even help the other side that you care about, which is for example, the Palestinians, if you don't build diplomatic relations. There must be, how you can promote anything to go forward if you don't have diplomatic relation with the other part. And also from a researcher point of view and journalist point of view, I couldn't know the other part if I don't go there and if I didn't see it and write from it from a fact, not only from reading from what is in the media and what has been said by the others. So the mission is so long, and what has been engraved for 72 years is not easy to be accomplished within 1 or 2 nights. It will take time, but we have to be persistent and we have to work from 2 sides, ideologically, through culture, through education, and through the media, and also from security, as His Excellency said, mainly intelligence, and then also the military. So we have to work to both organic sides to make it the whole thing organic and to be successful in this mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Najat. And as promised, the last word is to General Gantz.
Shukran, Joseph. I wish I could speak Arabic or English or other kinds of languages like you. This is a great privilege, and really, I'm looking very much to see each and every one of you, and I'm inviting you to come to visit Israel. Just as Najat just said, the best way to understand the other is going there, getting to know him, getting to know his challenges, getting to know the culture. I think it's very important. There is something we hardly mention, but it is worth mentioning. It is the peace which I'm looking forward to have, not just between us, but also between the Israeli and the Palestinians. It was not part of our discussion, but it's definitely part of our life. And I'm looking forward to the day which everybody around us will understand that no one is going anywhere, and that the best way of living together is to find the right solution. Now, I think that indeed, as Muhammad said, peace is the message. And it should be the message. But my friends, let us remember that peace is also some kind of a hardship. It is by far better hardship to work for peace and to struggle for peace than to do it for war. And between the alternatives, we should try and promote peace as much as possible. The more we work, the more we will advance it. And the more we will advance it, I hope that it will have also a good influence on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. We, as Israelis, we don't want to control other people. We just want to make sure that we find the right balance between maintaining our security and enabling the Palestinian sovereignty. And there is a combination there. It has to be a realistic one, but there should be some kind of combination. And I think that what we are currently doing by adding the normalization and the peace agreement between Bahrain and the Emirates, and hopefully, and sooner than later, with the Saudis and other countries. And of course, what we have with Jordan and Egypt. And, people give us, sometimes we give grades to the level of peace. This is a warm peace, this is the cold peace. I rather always have a warm peace, because I think the warmer the peace is, the stronger it is. But I'm telling you that the coldest peace is always better than the easiest war. So let us all hope to promote peace, first of all, between our two countries, between our 3 countries, 4 countries, 5 countries, 6 countries. It can be the formation of peace, finding way to unite itself vis-a-vis the formation of radicalism. And I'm sure that in that aspect, when we will have unfortunate radicalism and a very fortunate formation of peace, the good will end up winning. So this was indeed very, very exciting opportunity for me to speak with you. I hope that we will have more opportunities to spend longer time directly meeting, whether it's here or elsewhere in the region. And I hope that the kids of 20 years forward, the young generation of 20, 25 years ahead, that were just born in the last few months, will know that they were born into a better time of this region. Thank you so very much, and God bless you all. Shukran.
On behalf of, I think, everyone, we'd like to thank you very much, General, for making your valuable time ours for a little while. And I'm sure that we all look forward to being in further contact with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.